big deal.
All right, should we get started? Okay. Well, how's the deal sourcing, the deal hunt going? Anybody start? Not yet. For some more guidance. All right. Well, tonight we are going to talk about deal sourcing. And let's see if this works. All right. So here's the idea. We're going to talk about thematic deal sourcing, and we're going to talk about opportunistic deal sourcing. These are the two big ways in which venture capitalists approach this idea, this concept of deal sourcing. And then as part of the opportunistic, we're actually going to spend some time doing some deal sourcing together as a group. So we'll pull up some websites, we'll hunt around, and we'll talk about the deals that we see. What do we like, what do we not like? That way I figured that's probably the best way to teach you guys, at least how to like data dump my experience onto all of you, is actually like going through and doing it, rather than just me talking about it. So we'll do that, and then after that, like I'll recover, the deadlines and so forth. But then I've got a bunch of our team here, a bunch of students from our team at University Growth Fund, and they're going to go and spend time with, and I will as well, but we're going to kind of walk around and meet with each of you and understand kind of, one, do you have a team? Right? If you don't have a team, we'll help get you a team so you can compete. And two, if you do have a team, kind of start to get a feel for what your strategy is, start giving you feedback and helping you on your way. If that makes sense. Sound good? All right. Before we dive into that, though, it's been a couple weeks. Does anybody have any burning questions about how this program is running, what we're doing, anything along those lines? All right. If anything comes up, feel free to ask. During the presentation or after. I want these are meant to be workshops. They're meant to be as collaborative and engaging as humanly possible. I really don't want to just stand up here and lecture to all of you, right? Not fun. And you'll get a lot more out of it, the more engaging it is. So with that, there's this concept in deal sourcing for venture capital of, are you a hunter or are you a farmer? What do I mean by that? Any thoughts? What would be the difference in how you approach deal sourcing if you're a farmer versus a hunter? Yeah?
If you're a farmer, you kind of wait for it to come to you versus if you're a hunter, you kind of look.
Yeah, right. So that's right. Anybody want to expand on that, especially as it relates to deal sourcing? Yeah?
Well, maybe as a farmer, you're relying on some sort of external periodicity. As if you're a hunter, you're actually a lot more open to just strike with luck.
Okay. Who do you think works harder, hunters or farmers? Farmers? But according to her, they just kind of wait and let the deals come to them, right? Why do the farmers work harder? Yeah. Requires cultivation, right? So what does that look like from a deal sourcing perspective? What's cultivation? If you're a farmer, right, and that's your approach to deal sourcing, what does that look like? Yeah.
Doing your due diligence.
So certainly doing your due diligence. Yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah.
You might find a company that needs your help, needs your money to succeed.
Yeah, you want to find a company, right?
Yeah.
That needs your
something
help.
that just hunting out a company that's going to succeed and just taking a piece of the pie.
Yeah. So that kind of describes a hunter, right? You got to go find the company, right? All right. So this is the big difference between thematic and opportunistic deal sourcing. Thematic is all about you create a theory, right, around what is the next big thing, and you go and you find the next big thing. Does that make sense? Opportunistic says, look, I don't know necessarily what the next big thing is because I can't be an expert in everything. So instead, I'm going to position myself so that when that next big thing comes about, I am in the path so that I see the deals. Does that make sense? Both work very hard at their different approaches. Okay? Now, some of what I'm going to cover tonight is going to be very applicable to you, and some of it's not, frankly. Because at the end of the day, you're not a venture fund, you don't have a tremendous amount of time to build, to cultivate a whole field of potential, relationships that can yield deal flow. But I want this to be more than just preparing you for the competition. I want you guys to actually learn more about VC in general, right? So we're going to cover some of those things. So let's talk a little bit more about thematic. How many of you guys recognize Sequoia in the middle? Yes. A couple people? How many of you recognize all the other logos all the way around it? Right? A lot more people. Okay, so Sequoia is probably the best venture capital fund in the world. These are all their investments. And they didn't invest in these like when it was obvious. They invested in these things when it was early, super early. And they made a ton of money on a lot of these deals, right? Sequoia was like the first money practically into Apple, for example. They were some of the first money into WhatsApp. And they were the first money into Dropbox and pretty much the only investor in Dropbox. All the way from the time they launched their product, raised their first capital, all the way to when they IPO'd for over $10 billion, right? So you can imagine like their stake, if a typical venture fund takes like, 30% of a company, that one deal returned $3 billion to their fund on a fund that was probably about $300 million in size. So they are very good. Now, what do you think? Do you think that which approach do you think they take? Do they take a hunter approach or do they take a thematic approach? Thematic? Why?
All tech companies.
Huh?
It's all technology companies. It's focused on that one area as well.
Okay, so they are very focused on technology. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Although, they're probably positioned in the Bay Area too. I don't think. So they're right in the right spot. Things can happen.
Yeah.
Can it be a combination of two?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of the two, right? You know what's interesting though about Sequoia? So there's probably no other firm in the world that's better positioned to be a farmer, right? To be opportunistic in their approach. Because if you are a world-class entrepreneur, who's like the first one on your list you want to go pitch to?
No.
Sequoia, right? And so Sequoia ends up seeing just tons and tons of companies. They see so much deal flow. But here's the secret about Sequoia. They are not an opportunistic shop. They are very much a thematic shop. And what they do is they will identify some big trend that they think is super important. In fact, Don Valentine, the founder of the fund, there's a really great talk that he gives, you can look it up, where he talks about this debate. So there's this debate in venture capital. What matters? Does the team matter, or does the idea and the market matter? What do you think?
Team.
All right, everybody raise your hand if you think it's team. Raise your hand if you think it's market, an idea. Okay, so most people, the conventional wisdom is, I would rather invest in an A team with a B idea than a B idea, or than an A idea and a B team, right? Because if I have a great team, they'll, things don't go right, they can pivot, they can, do all those things. They can make it work. But what Don Valentine says is really interesting is he's like, no, it's all about the market. And it doesn't matter, like your team has to be good enough, but once they're good enough, it doesn't really matter. What you want to do is you want to ride the trends. You want to identify what's the next big thing and you want to ride it. And so their whole approach is they try to figure out what's that next big thing, and then they go and find the very best startup in that space. And they become experts, if you will, on that sector. And it's a lot deeper than just tech, right? We are going to become experts on, we think search, like internet's the thing, it's going to take off, it's going to be huge, but the problem with the internet is that how do you surf the internet? How do you find stuff? So search has got to be something that's super important. And so at that time, when Google was out there, when Yahoo was out there, like, there were a ton of search engine companies. Like, this is kind of an obvious idea, but they spent a lot of time figuring out who had the best search engine, who had the best team, and who was well positioned to win. And that resulted in their investment in Google. And you could tell similar stories about all of these things. So like WhatsApp, right? They could tell, like, look, there's communications globally. It's an important thing. It's all going to be driven mobile, right? They invested in WhatsApp. That was a deal, right, that was acquired by Facebook for like $23 billion. And again, they were like the only investor in that deal. And made a killing on it. So that's Sequoia's approach. They could be opportunistic. They could let the deals come to them, but they're very thoughtful in terms of what they go after. And what's awesome about their firm is that when they call an entrepreneur, do you think that entrepreneur picks up?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, right? Yeah, I would love to talk to you, Sequoia. Right? Let me tell you about my business. Right? And so they're able to leverage their brand to get really great access. And that kind of brings up an interesting point about an opportunistic approach, and that is, what matters then if you're going to pursue an opportunistic sourcing approach as a fund? What do you think is like some of the biggest drivers to being successful with that strategy? Any ideas? Deals come to me. So how do I get the deals to come to me? What do I gotta have? Yeah. Good marketing team. Okay. Marketing matters. I would say most venture funds don't have a great marketing team. It's not really what they do, but I like you're on the right track. Yeah.
You have to have a history of successful deals
Yeah. Why is that?
because it shows it shows the progress of your firm and how viable you are in terms of an investor.
Yeah. So it's all about your brand, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want to have a great track record and a great brand. And that extends beyond just doing great deals, right? Entrepreneurs also have to kind of like you, right? So there's a lot of talk. Did anybody follow the whole thing that happened with Uber where the board members at Benchmark were getting off the board and fighting with the founder, Travis, and he ended up getting the boot because of that whole mess? Anybody follow that? Anybody remember that? All right, so here's what happened. So Travis, the CEO of Uber, founder and CEO of Uber, was getting into a big fight with Benchmark. And Benchmark is also, if Sequoia's number one, Benchmark's number two, and if Benchmark's number one, Sequoia's number two. They're both really, really good funds. And Benchmark was like, we want to basically sell our stake. You know, this thing is now worth $70 billion. We think it's time to go public. It's whatever. And Travis didn't want to, and so there's this big fight ensued. And then on top of that, there was all this bad stuff coming out about Uber, right? You had Susan Flowers talking about all the sexual discrimination that was happening there and everything else, right? So what was interesting about that, though, is that Benchmark made it very clear through that process that they cared about their fund and not about the entrepreneur, right? And so from a reputation perspective, that can be potentially very damaging, because if you're an entrepreneur, right, you're the next Travis, are you going to be excited to go work with Benchmark if that's the way they're going to, that's how they treat their entrepreneurs? No, maybe not. Right? You may get stars in your eyes because it's Benchmark, and that brings a ton of weight and value, but reputation in this industry is everything. This industry is super, super relationship driven. Okay, so brand and reputation, super important. What else? Kind of hinted at it just now. What else do you gotta have? Just because I have a big brand, great brand, and a good reputation, is that enough?
Got people skills.
Got people skills?
You have to be able to talk. Interpersonal relations, you have to be able to small talk.
Yeah, you got to have good people skills, but even more than that, you have to have people, right? You have to have a network. People have to be able to get in front of you, right? And connected to you. So opportunistic investors, they focus on those kinds of things. They focus on building a really strong brand, having a great reputation, and having their fingers or their feelers out across the market. So when interesting opportunities arise, they find out about them. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go back to thematic venture investing. Has anybody seen one of these before? This is a Lumascape. So there's a company called Luma, and they make these Lumascapes that are great. They basically pick an industry, and they analyze the value chain of that industry, or a supply chain of sorts, right? Value chain is a little different than supply chain, but the same basic concept holds. And then they will analyze every single company that fits within that value chain, and they lay it out on these really cool maps. So if you're taking a thematic approach, right, to deal sourcing, you would think about like, what's the next big trend, right? Well, I think the next big trend is self-driving cars, okay? So if self-driving cars is one of the next big trends that I want to focus on as a thematic investor, then maybe what I do is I figure out what does the supply chain or the value creation chain look like for self-driving cars. So on one side of that spectrum, what could that be? If a value chain, so value chains are every step along the process from like basically raw materials to delivered happy customers of the product. So if you think about like notebooks, value chain for a notebook is there's some land, and then I plant trees in it, and then I harvest the trees, and then I turn the trees into paper pulp, and then I turn the paper pulp into large reams of paper, and then that gets cut down, right? And all the way down until it gets distributed to the local bookstore where I go and pick up and buy my notebook, right? So let's talk about self-driving cars. What does the value chain for self-driving cars look like? Yeah?
Research and development, is that there?
Yes, there's a lot of R&D, right?
And then design, they'd have to actually design the car.
Yeah. So on one end, wait, let's figure out our bookends, right? So at one end, we've got a car that drives itself, right? Okay, so that's our finished product, okay? And on this end is, yeah?
Some kind of like proprietary computer vision and data like algorithms that can self-drive the car.
Yeah, so there's probably a bunch of different things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would guess you could pick out two streams that kind of converge and lead to the end product that is the car, and that is the software side of things.
Yep.
With AI, algorithms, computer vision, and hardware as well, i.e. the physical car, like the substrate into which you put the algorithms for it to then become a car.
Sure.
Autonomous.
So for our example, let's pretend we're not actually going to build cars, because that's actually pretty challenging. We're not going to try to be Elon Musk and Tesla. But you're right. So we've got hardware, there's sensors and all that stuff that we need to have, and then there's software. Yeah.
Labor and hiring costs.
Yeah, so there's labor and hiring costs in there, right? And that's what kind of creates value, moves it along the chain. Yeah?
I was going to say, I think you got the three parts of the chain. You have to have the AI and the tech for the self-driving perspective. Then you have to have the physical product itself, which would be the car. But then you have to have the delivery net. So how does the person access the ride? So the three major ways to look at that would be Waymo or whatever that Google started with the tech for.
Uber, Lyft.
Then you have Uber, Lyft with the tech for calling it. And then Ford repositioned their entire brand last year to focus more on that. Dropping the cars and things like that to focus on that, and they have a whole delivery network if they could get the tech.
So if you think about this value chain, we're going to start off with sensors, right? Because in order to create artificial intelligence and machine learning that will actually self-drive the car in all different situations, you need data. Data feeds is what AI eats in order to create results, right? AI is based on the same way that you and I learn, right? And you and I learn by gaining experience, right? Same thing with artificial intelligence. So we have to be able to create data. We create that data with sensors, right? So that could be LiDAR systems, that could be radar systems, that could be sonar systems, that could be pressure sensors, it could be proximity sensors, it could be, you know, all kinds of different sensors that are constantly collecting data, right? So that's one thing. And then another part of the value chain is we need to have the software that can store that data, organize that data, make it accessible to our artificial intelligence software, right? That's all something that has to be done. We need a way to transmit that data back and forth, right? So that's going to be part of the value chain. And then you've got your actual like artificial intelligence engines, the software that's learning and telling the car what to do based on all of the data that's flowing into it, right? And then you've got, okay, then once I've got that, I've got to have software, I have to have a company that pulls it all together, right? So they're buying these sensors and maybe they develop their own software, or they use some of their software and they use some other people's software. So maybe they use like, we're going to use this mapping software from this other company and we're going to tie it in with our AI engine, right? So that mapping software could be another component of this value chain, right? You see how this is starting to get kind of complex, right? And all these pieces that flow into it, okay? And then, you had a good point, which is like, great, so you pull it all together, and then how does the customer access that product? Well, maybe you're looking at a Waymo, you're looking at Lyft, you're looking at Uber as delivery vehicles, or maybe you're looking at a Tesla as ways to deliver our self-driving car to a customer that will actually pay money for that value that's been created, right? So you would spend time mapping all of this out, and that's how you become an expert in the industry. And then you look at it and you say, where within this do I want to spend time? Where do I think these companies are going to be able to create and capture the most amount of value, right? Because it's one thing to create a lot of value, but you also have to be able to capture it, right? And what I mean by that is if I create a bunch of value for somebody but I don't charge anything for it, or don't charge enough, I didn't really capture any value. I just kind of gave it away, right? Which is fine, but it's really hard to make a lot of money doing that as a startup company and as an investor. So you got to look within this and try to figure out, okay, which companies in this whole chain are going to be able to create a ton of value and capture a ton of value. Okay? Any ideas where that might be in self-driving cars? Yeah.
Probably more the software AI side of it, because
Okay.
I'm not having to deal so much with manufacturing and like physical costs.
Yeah. So it turns out that like making sensors, unless you have like something super proprietary around your sensors, it's really hard to have anything special, right? Because there's just so many companies that are producing hardware, and then you have manufacturing costs and all these things, and so it ends up being really hard to capture a ton of value, right? In hardware. So yeah, it's probably something in the software. That's probably a part of it. What else? What else might be a piece where they're creating and capturing a lot of value? Any ideas? Yeah.
So I think it's the part of the software that understands the sensors and data and converts it into like meaningful like directions for the car. So it's like kind of how you said, like the transmitter in between all this data and what we want the car to do. That's like the area where they could create the best quality product, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they could look at like what they're replacing. So if the person's not steering the car anymore or whatever, what is he going to be doing? So like if there's entertainment or some kind of other interface or something,
Right.
create value there.
And maybe that's how you capture the value, right?
Yeah.
So like think about your phones, right? So Apple captures a lot of value by charging you very high prices for their phones, right? They create a lot of value because they make great products, but then they capture that value with high prices, right? Android phones tend to be a little cheaper, right? And the way they are capturing value is on your data, right? And on the software you use on the platform, right? So that's how they capture data. So there are different ways to capture it, and if you have a car, maybe you give away the rides, but then you charge for the entertainment in the car, or maybe you charge for access to internet in the car, or whatever it might be. right? So yeah, so there are different ways to monetize and capture value. In general, though, what you want to look for is you want to look for the areas where it's really hard to create the value and where there are very few competitors. Because those are the companies that are going to be able to create and capture most of the value. So I think, the artificial intelligence that kind of pulls it all together, there's probably something there that's really interesting. And I also think on the delivery mechanism, I think it's really hard to build a competitor to Uber and Lyft today, right? Because everybody's got Uber and Lyft on their phones already, and it's really hard to get people to add one more app onto their phone and actually use it, right? So that's pretty hard. So I think Uber and Lyft and whoever those companies are that kind of own that side of the market are also going to be able to capture a lot of the value, right? So anyways, these are the things you want to be thinking about if you want to take a thematic approach to investing. Does that make sense? It's more than just saying, I want to invest in like food companies, and now I'm a thematic investor, right? It's a lot more detailed. It's really understanding the whole value chain, where things fit, who's creating value, who's capturing that value, who's gonna have power where all of the people on one side of the value chain have to work with that company and all of the companies after them have to buy from that company. That's the company you want, right, to invest in. All right, any questions on thematic approach? So this picture is marketing, and they've broken it up with top media agencies. So you have public relations, like PR, marketing and data service, media agencies, digital agencies, creative agencies, and they've kind of broken out all the different startups and companies that work across those different sectors. So you could create something similar to that if you wanted to be really detailed. If you wanted to be really detailed, you could do this, which is all marketing technology across the entire value chain for marketing tech, MarTech. So as you can see, it can get like very, very complicated and deep. But the reality is that if you were to look at these, there are probably multiple winners in a whole bunch of these different spaces that you could invest in and do well. And what you would hope is that you could find the company that's going to win in that space, in that sector. All right, so an opportunistic approach. So a couple guidelines for that. So you're looking for great deals rather than looking for the best deal on a small. It's like you're trying to find like decent sized fish in a big pond, right? Versus the biggest fish in a small pond. But just because you're doing that, you still probably should refine your approach. And the reason for that is that when you go out and you start looking at deals, even on an opportunistic basis, it's going to be really hard for you to compare like a food company to an artificial intelligence company, right? So you probably want to narrow down on an opportunistic basis and say, you know what? We are going to focus on artificial intelligence. We're going to focus on self-driving cars. We're going to focus on consumer products, consumer branded products, food, clothing, whatever it could be. There are a lot of great companies, venture-backed, that have generated massive returns for investors in all of those sectors, right? And we're investors in like some really big data machine learning companies, and we're also investors in children all over it. Like, yeah, you go do that. And he's like, now after looking at a bunch of deals, getting a bunch of reps, my roommate will say, hey, I got this great idea, and I'm like, man, don't sink your savings into that one, right? Because it just takes time to learn what makes a good deal. And you gotta look at a lot of deals before you start seeing it. All right, so just a few things I'm gonna hit on to look for, and then we're gonna spend some time actually digging around looking for some deals. Sound good? All right, So you're going to be churning through a lot of deals, right, as part of this phase of the project, of the case competition, right? You look at lots of different companies. So you need to have some just high-level things that you can use to say yay or nay as you go through, right? So these are some of the things that I think are really important. There might be some other ones, especially if you kind of narrow in where you want to focus on other things. So is there something unique about what they do? Or is it just another Me Too product, okay? If it's a Me Too product, it's gonna be really tough to win, right? Especially if there are large incumbents already out there. So, do they have something unique? Do they have a unique angle? So when I talk about our investment in children's clothing, there are two things that are unique about that company that we like. One, it was founded by two women that ran diapers.com. So they understand how to sell basically generic stuff for kids online. Like they are the best in the world at doing that, right? That is a unique competitive advantage, okay? And then the other one that's kind of interesting is if you go to their website, it's primary.com, all of the clothes, they basically sell, I think, like 15 different colors. And all the clothes are one of those 15 different colors, and then they sell them from sizes 0 all the way up to like, I think, 12 years of age. And so if your kid has a favorite t-shirt, that favorite blue t-shirt, as they get older and they outgrow that t-shirt, you can just go on and buy them a new one. So they can keep having that favorite hoodie, that favorite t-shirt, that favorite pair of pants, whatever it is the entire time they're kids. The clothes are really high quality. And for them, they're like, look, there's so many people out there that are saying, you know, I don't actually want my kid to, like, I don't want to live vicariously through my kid on Instagram. I want them to actually have a life. So I want to give them, like, high quality clothes that don't have tons of designs and sequins and whatever it is. And so that's like a unique market for them. So that's their unique thing, right? In spite of the fact that it's just clothes. It's just children's clothes. So find the unique thing, if they have it or not, right? The next is it a big market? And is it growing ideally, right? Big market, growing. And the reason for that is I guarantee you, whatever company you invest in, they will pivot. And what we mean by pivot is like a very jargony word in our industry. What it means is they think like this is the way to do business, and they get down that road and they're making progress, and then they run into a speed bump and they have to change, right? If you're investing in a really big market, they can make lots of pivots in that market and still be okay. If you're investing in a really small niche market, and it turns out that like things don't quite work out the way that they were hoping it would, and they have to pivot, all of a sudden you're looking at a brand new market, and that opens up a whole new can of worms and risks and all kinds of things that you would rather avoid. So big markets, again, going back to our friend Don Valentine, right? I invest in big trends, right? Big markets, big trends. So that's what you want to focus on. And then you want a killer team. How do you tell if a team is killer? Any ideas? Great team. How do you tell? Yeah?
They've experienced in that market, like with another startup they had.
Yeah. Maybe they have some experience, they've grown a startup. I mean, that would be the ideal, right? Like, they built and sold for a huge number a company just like the one they're about to start, right? That would be great. Lots of experience. That's, if you can find it, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
I think it's important for the founders to be building something that they themselves would use. I think some of the most successful companies have grown out of something that the founder built because he or she wanted it, and they made it a thing, and then everyone else is like, hey, that's cool. I want
Yeah, so they're like personally, like intimately aware of the people, right? They know it, they felt it, they're solving for it, right? They're not like, oh, I think this would be a great idea. Like, I'm sure doctors need this wonderful app, even though I'm not a doctor and I have no clue what they actually need or don't, right? Versus a doctor who has felt that pain point starting a company. Makes a big difference. Anybody know the company Slack? Anybody use Slack? Anybody know the history of Slack? How that company came about? So Slack, if you haven't used it, it's a communication tool. It's very popular in the enterprise. When you guys graduate and get jobs, there's a high likelihood you'll use Slack. What's interesting about Slack is it was started in a company that was a mobile game company. They were making mobile games. And they had raised a bunch of money, but their mobile game wasn't doing so well. And so they were like, well, we have this tool that we built for internal communication within our company. Maybe there's something there and we could sell that. Turns out there was something there, that took off, and they're going to go public probably for like a $10 billion valuation pretty soon here this year. So yeah, I mean, they had a problem internally, they built a product for it, ended up doing pretty well for them. Totally not, I mean, that is like a way big pivot, right? We make mobile games and now we make enterprise software like communications. But that's the value of having a great team too, right? So they can make those pivots. The last thing I'll mention too is team market fit, which is a little bit, again, of having experience, being aware, on a deep level about the pain point. But it's also like, look, do you have the right team to be able to execute in that business, right? So I'll give you an example. We invested in a company called QuarterSpot. QuarterSpot does, they basically use machine learning to underwrite small business loans in seconds. And so they have a really great tech team, which is awesome. A really great, charismatic CEO, which is great, with good experience. Like he, built and sold a couple companies in and around the space. But they were missing a guy in Wall Street that could help them get the loans that they needed, the capital they needed to provide those loans to small businesses. And so that's an example of like, look, this is a great team. It's a really cool product. But like, until they added that guy that really had the relationships and had the know-how, knew how to navigate those financial debt markets and line up that capital for them, like they didn't have what I would call team market fit yet, right? So that's what you want to be looking for, is thinking about, if in order for them to be successful, what kind of team do they need to have in place in order to do that? All right, a couple other super fast things. Can it scale super fast? Right, we covered these things last week. Do they have unique access to product or partnership, whatever it might be? Do they operate a huge potential market? So I put this on up there because even though I said big market, sometimes markets are small. So there's an investor, Ben Horowitz, one of the top investors in Silicon Valley, and he jokes, we invest in crappy ideas operating in small markets run by inexperienced entrepreneurs. What he's really getting at, though, is the next big thing oftentimes looks like a crappy idea. How many people do you think thought when Airbnb went around pitching, how many VCs do you think shot them down and said, there's no way somebody's going to want to stay in somebody else's house, right? So many VCs passed on that deal, right? And how big was the market for people like renting for one night a room in their house at that time? It's like teeny, it didn't exist. It was like super teeny. So, and that's their point, right? But the Airbnb team, it was a massive potential market. They solved this huge pain point, right? And even though the team was really young and inexperienced, they were incredibly scrappy. One of the ways they demonstrated that was in order to raise money, because none of the VCs would invest. So in order to raise money, what they did is they made their own cereal. They had Obama O's and they had Captain McCain Crunch. And during the primaries for that election year, when those two were running against each other, they ran around and they sold boxes of cereal to delegates and other attendees of the different primaries. The primary conventions, and they raised, I think like $100,000 or something like that. That was enough money to get their startup off the ground. right? That is a scrappy entrepreneur. That's the kind of entrepreneur you want to back, right? They're passionate, they're scrappy, they're going to work hard. Even though they don't have experience, right? There's some other intangible things there. You want to look for, has some potential unfair advantage over competitors. So network effects is a good example of that, right? Once Lyft gets to the stage it's at, it's really hard to start a competing company to Lyft, right? They have all the drivers, they have all the passengers. It's just really hard. So network effects can be really powerful in that regard. Yeah.
Did your company look at Bounce, the local ride-sharing company?
What's the company? Bounce? No. What about Bounce?
Oh, they're local and they're trying to compete with Uber and Lyft by taking a smaller share and being nicer to the drivers, but their app is so bad that I couldn't register.
Yeah. Do you think at the end of the day though, like if you're a driver, do you care about making a little bit more per ride, or do you care about getting a lot of rides?
Stable rides.
You get, right? You're like, yeah, it would be nice if I made more per ride, but what I really care about is getting enough rides to just keep me busy, right? All right, and then also, it's got to be a company that can create liquidity in the next 5 to 10 years. What I mean by that is, if I invest, if I give this company money, how am I going to get my money back? Okay, and I'll tell you, this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm proud of it anyways. I made an investment in a company called Slide Belts. Has anybody heard of this company, Slide Belts? So they make a ratcheting belt, so there's no holes. Actually, this isn't a slide belt, but it's like it. And on the back end, it's got little ratchets, right? And so, anyways, kind of cool. Backed them on one of these sites that you guys are all using to find deals. I have no clue how I'm going to get my money back out of that deal. Right? What would have to happen for me to get my money out? Let's play it out. Let's talk about it.
It was a straight equity.
Straight equity, yep. I gave them $1,000.
What were the terms of guarantee?
I think it was $20 million pre-money. Actually, I think it went as a convertible note. But
Oh, okay. So I was going to say, did you use interest on it?
That is a good question. I should know that. I actually don't know if I have interest on it. But even if I do, I'm not getting paid out interest.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
like
getting.
it's like a big Russian guy in a nightstick type situation. That's gonna be a struggle to get back.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other people that invested a lot more than I did in it. What do you guys think? Yeah.
Makes sense from like an IPO, possible requirement by some other company.
Do you think they're going to go public? They sell belts.
No, someone could acquire them, yeah. But it's already public.
Somebody could acquire. Who would acquire?
Any clothing brand that's public, or maybe some distribution for clothing.
Okay, so maybe like a clothing brand,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, hey, this is a really cool product. You guys have built a really great brand. You have a good business. Maybe I'll buy it, right? Okay, so that's an option. So maybe a clothing brand buys it. Any other ideas of ways I could get my money back? Could get some liquidity? Probably not going public. What if they're really profitable? They generate a lot of profits. They could-
Quick question, is there a patent on the belt?
There are patents on the belt. So somebody could buy the patents, right? Which is kind of the same as buying the company. If the company generates a lot of profits, they could just issue dividends, and eventually, like, I would get enough paid out in dividends to recoup my original investment plus some. Or the company could just come back and say, hey, look, we're just going to buy your stock back, right? We'll do a buyback, like redemption clauses. So those are the options. What I want you guys to focus on, though, for this case study is be thinking about, look, unless that you can really demonstrate that they're going to generate massive profits in the short run, and that's really part of their strategy of buying you out, that's probably not going to be a good strategy. So you got to be thinking like, what has to be true for me to get my money back out? Are they going to get acquired? Are they going to go public? Right? Companies that can go public are ones that have to get really, really big and generate lots and lots of revenue, right? Companies that get acquired tend to need to have some unique thing that somebody else wants, right? So for example, let's talk about clothing. Clothing can totally be something where you get an exit. Does anybody know the company Bonobos? Okay, I see a couple heads nod. They started primarily making men's pants. That's what they did. Does anybody know who ended up acquiring Bonobos?
Wild guess. Levi's.
No, not Levi's. It's a good guess though. Walmart. And why did Walmart buy Bonobos? They need more pants.
E-commerce.
It's e-commerce. Who's Amazon's biggest threat today?
Walmart.
Or sorry, did I say Amazon?
Yeah. Walmart.
Well, actually, who's Walmart's biggest threat?
Amazon.
Amazon, right?
No way.
So what is Walmart trying to do?
Go after every e-commerce.
They're trying to build up their e-commerce, right? So why would they buy Bonobos? Bonobos was primarily an e-commerce men's pants brand. What were they actually buying?
Entry into the customers. Yeah.
They were buying the team. Because the team had demonstrated that they could sell pants online. Which, if you think about it, that's pretty tough. Right? Most people like to try on clothes before they buy them, right? And yet, Bonobos had built this incredible digital strategy where they could get people to buy their pants online and then come back and keep buying. And the pants are not cheap. They're like $100 pants, right? So part of what they did is they bought them because, look, it was a profitable business. It was growing. It was incremental revenue to their core business. They also bought it because the team had proven out that they would be really good. And so they took Andy Dunn, the CEO of that company, and put him in charge of a lot of their e-commerce efforts. They also bought another company called Jet.com. Anybody recognize that name? So Jet.com, they bought it for $3 billion because they wanted the CEO. And that CEO runs all of Amazon or all of Walmart.com. So you got to think about, like, now it's not all just they're acquiring the teams, right? It could be that they have a unique brand that's really interesting, or they tap into a unique market that another company would really like to have access to, right? But you need to be thinking about, like, what is an acquirer going to buy if they're going to buy this company? All right. This is important. I'm going to post this on the website. These are assumptions you have to work off of. You are partners at a $50 million fund. You're in year one of a 10-year life, so funds last for 10 years. You got to make all your investments in the first three-ish years, and then you harvest them on the second half of that. Your fund is targeting to make 30 to 50 seed deals. Okay? Seed or early stage. Okay? I just put that up there because you have to figure out how much you're going to actually invest in each deal. Well, in the deal that you end up selecting and proposing. So things to think about. How much of the company do you need to own? Right? So if you're going to make an investment, you remember our math from last week, if you're going to make an investment in a company that you think could someday be worth $100 million, and you have a $50 million fund, how much do you need to invest in that company to return your entire fund on that one deal?
At least half of the current company is worth?
I gotta own half the company, right? Right? So what does that mean? If the company is raising money, right, I have to write a big enough check at the right valuation to end up owning half the company. And then on top of that, I need to make sure I reserve enough capital so when they raise more money in the future, I can keep buying into the deal so I don't get diluted, right? Because as other investors invest money in the deal, and if I don't participate, then my position gets diluted. It shrinks over time, right? So you gotta be thinking about that, right? What's your strategy? How much in reserves are you gonna have to hold back? Right? You have a $50 million fund, you're going to make 30 to 50 investments. Some of those are going to die on the vine pretty quick, right? You're going to give them $1 million. 6 months later, they're going to shutter their doors, right? But the reason, and that's the reason why you need every deal to have the potential of returning your entire fund. because so many of them are going to be losses. Did we talk about Ron Conway last week? So Ron Conway, go look him up. He is the godfather. He's considered the godfather of Silicon Valley. He was like, so he had a fund in the 90s. And he was like some of the first money into Google. He also made 49-ish other investments. He lost his money on every single one of those other investments, all 49 of them. But Google ended up not only returning all of his invested capital, but returned a multiple of his investment capital. I think he got like 3 or 4 times his invested capital, all of his invested capital across all 50 deals back off of that one investment. And then he did it again with Facebook. So that's the mindset, though. You kind of have to go into it, if that makes sense, right? Every deal's got to have good potential. All right, so let's spend some time actually going through and finding some deals. We'll just spend a few minutes going through this, and then what I would like to do is have my students go around and myself as well and meet with you. And if you don't have a team, we'll help get you a team. But if you do have a team, let's talk about what your strategy is going to be. You're going to do opportunistic, more thematic, where you're going to kind of narrow things down and focus. All right, so where should we go? Anybody have any preference on any of these sites?
Seed Invest.
Seed Invest?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. So here we go, Seed Invest. Invest in highly vetted robotic startups. Okay. So let's go see, let's browse our startups. All right, let's start with this one.
Your
right
screen
here.
is not working.
Huh? Oh, no, what? So that works. Here. Looks like it works. Okay. So let's go through this deal. So let's see. They make a famed bistro that makes food. Let's see, also benefits the food bank. So there's some impact there. If that's kind of your thing, you like investing in things that have an impact. All right, so you could watch the video. We're not going to watch the video. All right, so things that we care about. So let's see. They sell ice cream. They did $5 million in sales since inception, and over 1.6 million in 2018. So, do we have any idea when inception started? 2013. Okay, so they've been around for 5-ish years, 5-6 years. Okay, so like you can kind of think through what that math would look like if they did 1.6 this year. Then for the remaining kind of 4-ish years, they did like 3.4 million. So okay, so there's some interesting growth there. 5 million, like that's real money. Like people are spending real money on that. What would I want to know if that's actually impressive or not? Yeah.
Some industry metric.
Yeah, I want to go spend some time in the industry. Like maybe like any Baskin Robbins out there does 5 million revenue a year. I don't know, right? So I need to spend some time understanding that, right? But maybe 5 million is, or 1.6 million in a year is like really impressive. 400 flavors. They sell pints at Whole Foods. Okay. 4 retail stores. They are raising $2 million. So far, they've raised $70,000. Is that a red flag? My could be a red flag, right?
Well, maybe they started yesterday or an hour ago.
Sure, maybe they started yesterday. Maybe it's not a red flag. Maybe it's just early, right? But it could be a red flag if they're going to have a hard time raising all the money they need. Let's see. And a pre-money valuation, $9 million. So does everybody understand what pre-money and post-money is? Total round? Should we spend some time on that? Okay. So your pre-money valuation. Ignore the pre-money side of it for a second. $9 million, that's what they're saying our company is worth today. They're like, today we are worth $9 million, okay? We need $2 million. So, investors are gonna give them $2 million, and then immediately after receiving the $2 million, the company is gonna say, we are now worth $11 million. We're gonna take our current valuation, we're gonna add $2 million. Promise you that just giving us the $2 million did not destroy any value of that money. And so our post-money valuation is $11 million. That's all it is. Pre-money is before you take the investment. Post-money is after you take the investment. Now, what's going to happen between now and then? If they have a really great business, they'll take that $2 million, they'll use it really, really well, and they'll generate a massive return on that. And so then the next time they go out and raise money, maybe the pre-money is like $20 million, right? They grew that $2 million from $2 million in value to like $10 million of value, right? And doubled the valuation. The flip side could also happen. Could be that they get the money and then they like literally destroy value, right? They invest the $2 million in all the wrong things and it doesn't pan out for them, and actually the company ends up doing worse. And then you have what's called a down round, where the value of the company is actually worth less than $9 million. Or it could be flat. So they took the money, they invested it, and they basically got $1 return for every dollar they invested, right? That would be flat, so then our next round would be raised at $11 million pre-money valuation. Does that make sense? All right. So they are selling, what? A little less than 20% of the company. $2 million. Okay. So what do we think about ice cream? Big market, small market? Yeah?
It's stupid. Do you want to look at another company on the
You want to look at another company?
It's not Phase.
All right, we'll get to that one. But I do want to just spend a little bit more time on this because it's just looking at and thinking through this. You're going to look at a lot of crappy companies. So big market, small market, ice cream, yeah?
Well, big yet saturated market.
Yeah, big, but like super saturated. And is it really big where they're operating?
Where are they?
Not really. They're like in New York City. So Brooklyn, Manhattan, it's kind of it. They sell through a handful of Whole Foods. It's pretty small. They're looking to expand outside of New York City. Okay. All right. Oh, this is funny. Do you guys see this? Confidential. Do not distribute. Widely available. All right. So here you go. I mean, they're saying that their competitive advantage is that it's really good and they have quirky flavors. All right. Well, I mean, that seems like kind of a played out strategy, right? Anybody go to Salt and Straw? Any Salt and Straw? Really good, kind of wacky flavors. Yeah.
Honey lavender.
400 flavors. I mean, maybe that's the thing. They have a lot of flavors. They spend a lot of time on it. They do odd collaborations. All right. So, I mean, that's kind of cool. They work with some cool brands, right? So they've got some good partnerships. They sell in some retail shops, restaurants. They sell pints. They sell through different restaurants. So they were doing some redesign, doing a kitchen, launching some. Wow, this is a long deck. 24 slides. Okay, it's a ton of strategy here. Okay, so what do we think? Is there exit potential for this business? Who's going to buy it? What do you think? Is there potential? Yeah.
It could be bought by Baskin Robbins or something. It's like in their high-end line or something.
Sure. So maybe is it Dryer's ice cream or whatever buys them? right? Maybe they want a higher end ice cream that they want to sell. Compete with Ben and Jerry's, for example. So that's possible. What would have to happen for that to come true? It is. Yeah.
You'd have to generate a lot of sales.
They have to generate a lot of sales and probably like really establish their brand, right? Be a dominant brand that people want and ask for and are willing to pay a premium for, right? They probably have to expand quite a bit beyond New York in order to do that, right? So do you think $2 million is going to get them there? Now, how capital efficient do you think an ice cream business is? Not super capital efficient, right? You have to buy all these ingredients, you have manufacturing, you have kitchens that you have to keep up, running. Rent, there's all kinds of things, right? And every time I sell a new ice cream, I gotta spend the money to actually make the ice cream, package it, and sell it, right? So not very scalable. Okay,